Hi, scalable investors. Today I have with me Charles Carillo. Charles is the founder of Harborside Partners based in Florida. Although Charles is originally from Connecticut, he made his way down there. And currently they are invested in over 250 units across 6 different properties. And really excited to have you on, Charles. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So why don't we just get into things? We were previously discussing your background and how you got involved in real estate. Why don't you just flesh that out a little bit more for our listeners and tell us your background?
Yeah, so my dad was a real estate investor. He's been investing since the '80s in multifamily and commercial property. So I grew up in the business. He was developing properties. He flipped some houses, and the majority of it was he had a lot of commercial properties. Whether they're 6-unit properties, whether they're 18-unit mixed-use properties. So he had a whole array of different properties that I grew up and collecting rent and doing all that type of stuff, dealing with superintendents and the whole 9 yards of everything that goes with it. And I bought my first property after college and in '06, and I still own it today. And then we bought a couple other properties afterwards, a commercial property in '09, another multifamily in '08. And then we started syndicating properties a few years later. And yeah, so right now what we do is what we're focusing on is syndicating multifamily properties mostly. And it's 80 units plus is usually what our minimum is. We had one property that was smaller last year, but that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking in growing areas just like every other syndicator out there. We really like the Southeast. I'm based in Florida now, as you said, but yeah, that's kind of where I am now and how I got started.
Okay. And what was the minimum units you said?
For syndicating properties, we usually it's usually 80 units, 75 units plus. We did one last year that was 59, but that's usually kind of where we see it, that we have some scale. And it depends on the area. If we have other units or other properties in the area, then it'll be something that we focus on. So.
Okay. For a second there, I thought you said 8, and I was like, that doesn't sound very scalable. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard a variety of minimum thresholds, like you don't have scale until it's 32 or at least 16 or whatever it is. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, with the syndication, just on your legal fees alone are $15,000 to $20,000, and that's with kind of any syndication you're working with across any type of commercial asset class. So you just want to make sure that if you're shelling out that kind of money up front, that you have something that's actually of a good size. Some people do it on doors. Some people will do it. I know some syndicators that only do $20 million and above. It just really depends on the properties you're looking at, mainly the area and what the availability is. If you're doing it without syndication, you can go a lot smaller because you don't have all those fees. Even if you're just doing it with one partner, it's a lot less expensive to put together a partnership agreement with an attorney than it is a whole syndication, SEC filings, the whole 9 yards that you have to do with the syndication.
Okay, and it might even be a different attorney, right? Because some attorneys have syndication experience, while others maybe just have that partnership agreement experience.
Yeah, for the most part, we have for one group I work with, our firm works with. They take care of both sides of it. So they handle actually doing the SEC filing, they'll handle doing the escrow, and they'll actually handle doing the closing as well. But most attorneys are going to be doing just just one side of it. And with the SEC attorney, which is one relief, is that they can be from anywhere in the United States. So you can have a syndication attorney in California. If you're working in Florida, it's not a problem because it's it's a national thing. Versus really a closing attorney is typically state by state.
Okay, that makes sense. And in your bio, prior to getting involved in real estate full time, I noticed that you had ran an online business. So just to go on a small side note, I'm really interested in hearing about that and why you decided to focus eventually on just real estate investing.
Well, the real goal was always to buy more multifamily properties, commercial properties, and kind of build out that whole portfolio. What I started on doing, and I was running a company that's now I've merged it with a different business, and my brother really mainly handles that now. But we were running a payment processing business, spending a lot of time. We had a lot of partners and clients in Europe, mainly Eastern Europe as well. So we'd spend months at a time over there at different times during the year. So it was great because the business could all be run by computer, computer and phone, which is how I enjoy working. And it wasn't a scalable business model. And I tried a number of different ways to try to make it scalable, and it just wasn't. I mean, every time that you tried to get growth, you just were unable to. You get to an income threshold, and that was it. And you didn't have complete control over it because you're working with other partners and stuff. And it's much easier when we set up to work with and go full time into our real estate business to make that a scalable venture, because we had a lot of process. Not that we were running every part of it, but we had control over it. So we had partners that would handle, say, the deal flow, and we would handle bringing the capital and some of the asset management, some of the due diligence. But it was something where I don't like doing the underwriting, right? I can review the underwriting, I can tweak underwriting, I can remove some of the assumptions in underwriting to make sure it fits what I want to see. But when you have a partner that loves doing that all day long, looking at the 12 tab, as we call it, right? Excel spreadsheet, and then they send it over to you and they're telling you and they're explaining to you when you're taking notes on, say, why do you have this and why do you have that? It's much more powerful to do that than me trying to talk to a broker and explain to him why on sheet 7, line 47, it says that this assumption for taxes is incorrect, where we think it's something completely different, with someone that loves doing it. So it's kind of like playing to your strengths, focusing on stuff. And that's kind of how we run our business, is try to be scalable, which I know your podcast is all about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Not to spend too much time on the payment processing business, but I'm just curious, what were some of the bottlenecks? I know you said income thresholds. What were some other things there?
It was kind of, you did have residual income, but it was, you had to keep on spinning the plates, right? So it wasn't true residual income. It's not like if you put money passively into a syndication or something like that, and I open up my bank account and there's money there, right? Kind of a thing. It's consistent and I own part of the asset. There wasn't anything like that, right? There wasn't an asset that was being built. It wasn't something that you could really sell, right? It was something that you had some of the income streams, right, that were coming in, but it required constant maintenance to make sure everything was running smoothly. There was constant problems that you had. I think you can have this in all different types of businesses where you have business, you have money coming in, you're doing well, but it's just when you look at it from afar and you're kind of looking at what you've done, you're like, well, once I get to this step, I can scale or something. You should, for a true scalable business, I believe that you should be able to do it from the beginning. Obviously, on a smaller scale, it's going to be much difficult, but you should be able to have that framework when you're starting a business. If your goal really is, hey, I want to really have money and time freedom, then from the beginning, I should be saying, okay, I'm setting up my operating procedures. I'm setting up how my network, how my system is going to work. When something comes in, the flow chart starts and it goes around to the different people in my organization, and it has to gets to me if something's like a major problem. So like if you say you just bought a small self-storage complex, right? And you have, there's not even someone manning it there, right? You have a property manager that's reviewing it, keeping an eye on it for you. You have the payments coming in on an automatic payment system. And you might say to your property management, the person that goes and checks on, say, hey, anything under $1,000, you take care of it. It's in your best judgment. Anything over $1,000 gets to me. So right off the bat, you've just knocked out a whole bunch of small stuff when they're asking about, hey, there's something wrong with the drain here and it's $300, right? Well, I'm not taking that phone call. Go to Home Depot, send the guy down to Home Depot, have him fix it, correct the issue. And that's when you start. It's not perfect in the beginning, but you can see the scale in the beginning. And I just never had that with that business. And it was something where my brother was running a similar business, and we decided, put it together, and he kind of handles it now. And it's something we'll probably, at some point, some of the income streams we can actually sell, we'll probably end up selling it. But at this point, he runs it and he loves doing that. And that's kind of what his forte is.
Okay, yeah, it's very interesting. And I noticed that you also, previous to using property management for your own multifamily assets. You had done that for 6 years. So what was that process? And also, it doesn't seem necessarily scalable if you're spending all your time on that. So I completely understand why you eventually outsourced that. But why don't you just go into more detail about all of that?
Yeah, well, I wish I had listened to podcasts like this when I was younger. I just wasn't. I was kind of just figuring out where everything was, and when I was starting, everything was running. I was living in one of the properties actually that we had purchased. So, and all of them were within like I think 0.4 of a mile how I had it set up. So everything was actually you could actually walk to the different properties. We had a storage unit in one of the properties. Like we had everything all set. But the problem was that you're doing a lot of low level kind of pay jobs, right? And I wasn't focusing on acquiring new properties. And that's what I should have been focusing on. Obviously, you're in your early 20s, you're not thinking about scaling a business usually. And if I had the reason I kind of gave up and hired a third-party property manager was because I was actually moving to Florida. And I didn't really have a choice. If I wanted to keep properties, I didn't want to sell them. And so that was great. It was something that was kind of like a hidden thing that happened when I made the move. But I think the main thing was that if I had just earlier, even if I still managed them myself and I just took off a lot of the smaller activities that I was doing and had someone else do it or other people do it, and I got better at the end of it, but then it came down to before I was handing it off and before I made the decision, really, I was, you spend time collecting rent, stuff like this. And it's not that it's just you're taking away so much time valuable that I should be looking at deals. I should be walking deals. I should be talking to investors. You know what I mean? I should be setting up and making sure that, hey, the landscaping crew is taking care of not just snow, they're also taking care of the lawn. And now I want to also pick up litter, like all this kind of stuff, taking everything off my plate. Right. And I think that was the main thing that I had with my management was that in the beginning of self-managing, I did everything little by little. I was taking stuff off my plate where I was just collecting rents and some of the higher level, as I thought, activities, which all could have been automated. But it is hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah. And I realized that once you're starting to use third-party property management, it's still important to manage the manager and do the asset management side of things. So do you feel like doing it yourself first helped you to now do it and manage the property manager?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think for sure it has, because it's like bring your car to a garage and the guy explained to you behind the counter how your starters changed in your car, how's it replaced, and the guy never have done it before, right? So the thing is, it's a much different when you talk to somebody and he's like, he just changed one like a week ago, right? Or he's done it years ago, whatever it was. And he knows what the process is. He can explain to you, I mean, pretty much how many times he's turning that wrench to tighten it, how many times he's turning it to take it off, right? I mean, so when I'm talking to my property manager and they're telling me about different things, you can also foresee problems that are going to happen. So when we buy multifamily, we're buying stuff a lot in C plus areas, right? And C plus is a much different asset than like say a B class multifamily. You have a whole different, level of tenant, let's say. And so managing them is completely different. You need to have a manager for it. So when you're speaking to managers, property management companies, and you're saying, this is what we're buying, this is what's happening, you can kind of vet them and know exactly, well, what do you do? Where your property is closer to this? And you kind of know the whole process of, hey, now we're buying, and you're buying a property and you've done that management, you know exactly what this tenant base is probably going to pan out to be. And you're just not taking the broker's word for it as well. So it's something where it kind of evens out all the rough edges with your knowledge. And, even though it wasn't the best use of my time, it's definitely, the information is definitely invaluable for the rest of my real estate career, now and then into the future, because you're kind of figuring out how everything works. What property managers, what the cost goes involved with that. And then also I'd like to see too, is especially when I was self-managing, then I want to see how they were managing the property after me. Because obviously everybody that's self-employed says, you're not going to manage it as good as I am and all this kind of stuff, which is probably true. I wouldn't even doubt that. But the thing is that you have a system in place and someone takes over and they can handle the asset, your property's still in good condition, stays in good condition, issues are taken care of right away, money's collected, people aren't sitting in there for months that haven't paid rent, and just know that their system's in place. And I can't, you're just kind of plugging yourself in there when you hire the third-party management.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I know when I was in college, I replaced on my car, I had like a 1996 Honda Accord, and it was things would just naturally fall off and break. And so I had to replace the battery, the radiator. What else? Oh, the starter, and I think a distributor thing. I don't even remember. So I completely hear you there. I'm definitely more confident going to the mechanic now. And if he tries to pitch me on, oh, you need to, flush your entire radiator and do all this and that, I'm like, no, I don't think I do.
Yeah.
You can kind of like call them out as well. Not sure necessarily property managers are always trying to upsell you on things, but it's always really important to understand.
Yeah, you just have to watch out for everything, especially when you're working with investors' money. You have to make sure that when they're telling you, hey, we charge $500, $600 to rent an apartment, you might look back on it and you'd be like, well, this is a pretty big complex. That's very expensive. And then you take that and you take your notes on it and you can speak to another manager. And then you find out that, oh yeah, this is much more in line with what I'm thinking. How do you do this with other properties? And you kind of know the nuts and bolts of it, and you're kind of working backwards. Whereas a lot of investors, especially if they have a full-time job or something like this, and they're unable to get away from it and they're trying to manage it all, they don't really know what's going on at the property, right? They don't know what's going on in the property. They don't know that, hey, 1 month of rent is what happens when you have a condo and you give it to a property manager and he rents it for you. When you have an apartment complex and you have someone full-time, you might bonus them only $75. So you have to know these things beforehand going in and, taking money from investors, number one, but also when you're working with these other vendors and these other partners in your business, let's say, even though they're not sharing on your equity, I mean, they are partners. I mean, your property manager is probably the most important person of your whole team. They're on the ground every day, or someone from their team is on the ground every day in your area at your property. And on larger properties, we'll do a weekly call with our PM on the asset management part. On my smaller properties, it'll probably be once a month. Or maybe I talk to someone just quickly by email once a month. So it just all depends on, what your goal is with that property.
Okay. And some of our listeners might already be involved with like a single family property and maybe managing that themselves. Do you feel like any of that experience will be transferable, or is it just a completely different ballpark when you're doing multifamily assets?
No, I think a lot of it's transferable. I think you're going to be walking properties, right? In the beginning, you're walking properties, you're seeing exactly how much it's going to cost to do a bathroom, how much it costs to do a kitchen. So if someone has experience, let's say, in walking through a single family property and saying, I know it's going to cost $6,000 for this, $2,000 for this, $1,000 for this. You can then transfer that to the multifamily, definitely. And a lot of people do. Where I grew up and was investing and stuff like that before moving to Florida, you would know all the different contractors, and they all were flipping houses. Then they all multifamily. They were interchangeable between them. Now, do they have a system in place where they could take off and actually scale it? No, it's very rare that you speak to someone in the real estate, especially like in the mom and pop real estate sphere, that actually have a system. And but it is something that you can transfer, because a lot of parts of the house are all the same. It's just a different thing where your things are going to change, is that things are going to be less expensive, right? So your management's going to be less expensive with multifamily. You're now going to be able to get better deals with contractors. You have more units to replace, more hot water heaters, more sinks, more lawns, more roofs to repair, and everything else.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's where the scale comes from, and that's why you do it, because people eventually hit a wall and they realize single family is just not scalable, and it's requiring a lot of energy and heavy lifting. So that's definitely very interesting. To go a slightly different direction now, I read that you believe it's really important before raising other people's money in these syndications. It's important to put your own money at risk. And why do you feel that? Say like if I sourced a 12-unit smaller multifamily asset, they still gave me that multifamily experience. Why do you feel like that would be crucial first before syndicating a deal?
I think it's just because, I mean, unless you have people that are close to you that are going to let you borrow money or invest money, let's say, invest money, we're talking about larger syndications with you, and they trust you on that. And you have some people that are very experienced on your team. I think it's better, even if they're smaller deals, it doesn't matter. Like you said, single family, duplex, triplex, quad, you have some sort of experience with dealing with, if you're, let's say we're buying multifamily, you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with, when you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with everything else that goes with it, right? The insurance companies, you've put together some sort of budget. How is that budget planned? Like stuff's definitely going to differ, especially in your first deal. I mean, my first deal, I didn't have like a budget. I mean, we had like, it was like a legal page, right? And we were like just putting out, and we were just pulling numbers out of thin air, really. And I'd bring it to my dad, and he was like, yeah, I guess that's right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you didn't know. And so for someone to invest into that is completely crazy. I mean, I never even asked anybody to invest into any of my projects for, 5+ years that I started in real estate, because it was just something that, I was just getting started myself, and figuring out exactly what was happening. So it could be on a smaller property, but it's something that you had that proof of concept, which is important with any business. The first time the money hits your bank account, the first time that you're able to check all these estimates and all these proposals and pro formas that you've put together in your head or on paper or on spreadsheets, and see how far you are off. And hopefully you're not too far off. But then you also figure out too, and you go, wow, I know they say $250 a unit per year for reserves is what I should do. I found out that I need like $375 a unit. Okay, great. So my next property, I'm going to make sure I've got $375 put aside for this neighborhood, this age of property. This is really what I want. You're going to fine tune your own process. And then when you bring that to an investor, like if we were talking and I was asking, I was telling you, and I was pulling out numbers of what we were doing, and I had like a really, a little booklet I showed you, and I said, this is what we did. This is what we found. And like, this is kind of where we are now with what's going on. And then we just did our second project, and we're like, now we're trying to get bigger for our third project. I'm going to have a lot more confidence in you. You've tested your strategies. You have some sort of track record with that strategies. You figured out kind of where your issues were. And that, I found the same thing. Like when we bought our second property, with our first property, we were trying to renovate it while renting different units. And it was just like a huge mess. It should have all been done at once. And this is usually because lack of funds, right? So it's something where on our second property, we didn't have lack of funds. We went in there, bought the property. Everything was done correctly from the beginning. It was rented out, and it was much smoother process. On the third property, it was the same thing, done even quicker. And that thing was all done within like 2 months. It was rented out. There was no lingering construction jobs for years or anything like that, which you see a lot with mom and pops, where you see a renovation project just go on and on and on because they're trying to pay for stuff with cash flow. They didn't raise it up front. I mean, these are all things that new investors, I guess even some experienced seasoned investors, might make as well if they stay in the mom and pop type investment strategy.
Okay. Yeah. And I've also, just to add too, that I've heard that if you're just trying to raise the debt financing, for example, from a private money lender, it's ideal to go with a more experienced hard money lender versus your rich uncle or cousin, for example, just because of that experience. If something goes wrong, then I mean, that really changes the whole dynamic. And obviously you can't rely on your investors to say, hey, what would you do in this situation? They're like, I don't know. That's why I'm investing with you, because you're supposed to be the expert. So
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, what you just said as well. Okay. So say that I'm really busy with a day job, and I feel like I'm having trouble really understanding how to get started beyond just maybe a single family rental property here or there. And what are some of the ways that you feel people can get involved investing, either actively or passively, while keeping the day job?
Well, actively, if you want to get involved actively, I mean, buying a 1 to 40 unit and using your FHA, which is like a minimal down payment, and you can purchase a property, you can get involved with it, use your W-2 kind of to leverage it, because you're using that really to sign for on the debt. And that's a great way of getting exposure if you don't mind living in the property with tenants, which I did for years. It's not really, but you learn hands-on, and it's not at a high degree. So you only have 2 tenants, right, that you're dealing with, right? So it's something where you minimize problems and you kind of get a taste of what you're doing and what's happening. it's a lot of work to prepare for that because you have to have everything, your handymen, contractors. You don't, when there's an issue starting on real estate, you don't want to be going through, not that people go through it anymore, but my example is like Yellow Pages, right? And get Yellow Pages type pricing. Some guy that shows up, fixes your furnace, your HVAC or hot water heater, and is charging you $100 an hour, right? You want the guy that shows up that $25 here, $30 here, will show up at nut, you know what I mean? Kind of a thing like that. You don't want to be paying a list price for services. And these are all things you have to work out as you start. If you have a job and you're actually doing well and you have a trajectory of actually making a lot more money and can be self-employed or have your own job, that's when I talk to people and I ask them, why do you really want to buy this property yourself or anything like that? Because that's more of a passive income type approach, which is going to be a better scenario for that person. If you're making good money, you're going to be making good money, better money into the future. Focus and, put your money behind a syndicator. Sometimes they'll let you in with not that much of money, depending on your relationship with them. And you can get involved in a deal and earn true passive income. Because once you've made the decision to invest, I mean, you're really getting an email once a month. You're getting distributions that don't take any work. So, I mean, you're spending like a half hour a year managing that investment. It's very, very simple. And the most of that time is just passing the K1 to your accountant at the end of the year. So.
Okay. And do you feel like some people don't passively invest maybe because they're just not aware of it? I know I wasn't when I first started out. And then as I learned more, I learned about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people too want to have the control, and they want to learn it first, and they feel this is the way to learn it, and that's fine. I mean, it's whatever. But the thing too is that if you're in a job, and let's say you figure out your hourly is $100 an hour for what you're doing, right? Even if it's 75, I mean, and do you really want to be taking phone calls at work? Do you really want to be stopping by units at the end of the day and trying to collect rent? Do you really want to be figuring out the different toilet in a box that you want to get for unit one? I mean, do you want to do all this stuff? Because it's not something, you might as well send it to a property manager that's going to take that call at all hours. That's going to send out someone that's going to handle the problem. The issue that happens is that you're buying a 3-unit, for example, and you're going to be paying 8, 9, 10% property management fee on that, plus all the other fees that go along with it. So it's very difficult to cash flow on something like that with just the 3 units. Now, I've known one investor that had like 35 3-family properties that he owned himself. Okay, in one town, that's a lot of scale. So that's someone that now he has full-time people. He's got full-time handymen that work on it. He's got someone that's going to handle phone calls. He's got a system in place that can scale. He can add on, 5 more 3-families in the next few months without an issue. So that's a system in place. And if he gave that to a management company, his management fee is not going to be 8, 9, 10%. It's probably going to be half that. So it's something where you actually have a model there that you can scale. So if your real goal is, hey, I want to actively invest, I hate my job, I want to leave. All right, well, then you can go into the active route and learn it, hands-on. But I've actively invested, I've passively invested, and getting those passive emails when everybody's busy and you're getting those emails and it says that, income was up $300, expenses were down $100 for the month, and and we made $200 more for the whole property or whatever it was that comes in. There's nothing better than that. And there's nothing better than checking your online banking and getting a notification that you just got an ACH that came into your account without doing anything. And that's really where the true wealth is made, because you can actually scale that. You can scale it just being a passive investor and saying, listen, my goal is to invest in 1 or 2 syndications a year. And then I'm going to take all those profits from that and roll them back in. You know what I mean? That's where you're getting that real compounding factor. And if your goal is getting out of your job in 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it might be, you can definitely do that with passive investing if you have the right strategy for doing it. It's just, I think some people really want to do the active investing, and I think some don't know that it's available, like you were saying, which is too bad. But syndication now is such a big word with people getting involved with it. It adds another asset class to people that are investing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the first thing that appealed to me as I learned more about it was it's just, it really trumps the old model of putting all your money in the stock market, averaging 10% a year. And then when you retire, you maybe have $1 million. And then what? You live off of well, you can't really live off the interest. It's not like a bond. I mean, maybe dividends if it's a 10% dividend yielding stock, but good luck. Otherwise, you're eating into principal. Whereas with the real estate syndication deal, you're just getting mailbox money, like you said, and that's not even eating into the principal. And then at the end of usually 5 years, hopefully the equity multiple is about 2 times. So you're doubling your money every 5 years and just rolling it in. So that just blew my mind and made perfect sense. And I think one thing too to add in terms of just investing passively and with a more experienced partner, whether it's the syndicator or the property manager, is just like you just don't know things up front when you're starting out. Like for my first 2 rental properties, I bought them off the MLS, and that right there, that's a problem. Is I didn't realize that I'm supposed to be targeting foreclosures and buying at these bargain deals, like 70% of ARV and all this different stuff. And so naturally, I'm buying it at a market price and just cash flowing me $200 that goes to repairs. So I'm breaking even at best.
Yeah, but that means you might have a different strategy though. So you had a strategy with the MLS and turnkey properties. Say you have a full-time job, that might work better with what you're doing. You might be happy with that return, and it might fit into what's happening. I mean, if you really wanted to create the value, you're going to find that distressed property, right? But everybody has their own investment strategy. I mean, people send me deals over all the time with stuff that I wouldn't invest into, and I look at it, and it's somebody sent me a property in an area that's not really a growing area of the country, and it was not that high of returns, but it was a straight yield play. And this guy will raise that money from wealthy people from the Northeast in no time, because people just want to they want 7%. They want to put into their account, and that's it. And it's just, everybody has a different part of where they are in their investing journey. And obviously commercial real estate is always part of any wealthy family's family office type plan. But like you're saying, your plan changed because you found out you're leaving so much money on the table. But that's a lot more time, right? When you start looking for foreclosures.
Yeah, and even then, it's another thing you have to learn. Whereas if you partner with a syndicator who's already sourced that deal and knows exactly how to maximize the value on it and give you passive returns that are going to be higher than your single family asset, then it just makes a lot more sense. So yeah, and that was just what was frustrating to me. I had read a book and had this concept, like most people do, of building a portfolio of like 100 single family assets and just living off of this awesome portfolio. But there's so many things that I learned that are just wrong with that concept. At first, it's not very scalable unless you have systems in place like that one individual you mentioned. So
yeah, I actually have someone I know, a good friend of mine, has 100 single family house. The other guy had 30 or something like this, but 3 families. But I have one guy that does have 100 single family houses, and I ask him every time I see him and we talk about it. I'm always stressed, just like you are. You're stressed just hearing about 100 single family houses, and he's like, "No, I got someone that handles it." And I'm like, "Did you buy them all as a portfolio?" Because I'm thinking maybe there are systems in place. He's like, "No, I bought them like one by one," and I was like, "Wow, like that's." But system in place, he doesn't even bat an eye on it. You know what I mean? Because he sets it up. Now he syndicates multifamily, but he keeps those 100 units. He has full-time people running them. So everybody has their own investment strategy, what the returns that they feel. I mean, people reach out to me and want 20, 25% returns. So it's not a possible thing. If you want that, it is, commercial real estate is just not your thing. And if you're going to find those returns, it's not going to be from an investment, because we're much more conservative, right? I don't even know where I could even come up and pull a portfolio for those type of numbers. But so it's just everybody, you have to align yourself with the people that are on the same page with you. You're saying, hey, we're making 8, 9, 10% cash on cash. Total return is going to be 15 to 20. Are you interested in this property? If I find one that's in this range for you, right? And we move from there, right? But you might sell those ones that you've already set up on MLS. You might sell those to an investor that says, "Wow, I just want to have a single family. This guy's got a tenant in there. It's like perfectly run." You know what I mean? And it might work perfectly for him.
yeah, and that was our initial goal, because I was actually living in New York and purchasing properties in Texas, and we just didn't really want to go through the headaches of having to renovate, having just a total gut job, fix and flip type of stuff. So that was the initial concept. But I think one thing that was funny was after managing one of the properties for a year and having the tenant abandon the property and having a lot of just I'm not going to deal with this anymore type of experiences. I hired a property manager, and it was funny. They were actually able to get it leased up again within like a couple of weeks of hiring them at a higher, probably $250 higher. So they're already like paying for themselves and their fee, and we're still cash flowing more than my own personal management efforts. So that was a pretty funny experience.
Yeah. I just think with anything, and your whole podcast is about this, just if I can interject one thing, is that the more units, the more income streams that you have. I mean, everybody's going to have those stories. I mean, I can tell you a number of stories, like horror stories of everything that's happened in these properties that I've owned. And the more units you have, the more consistent it is, the more stable it is. And when it's stable, it makes it much easier to scale. Yes, you have to be planning from the beginning on how you're going to scale it. But when you have the consistent income, you go, now I have consistent X amount that comes in every month, right? Because I'm going to have, 5% being turned over, 5% vacant, whatever it might be. And I know this is coming in every month. Now I can hire someone to take this off my plate. And I think the more it just keeps everything stable. So you can have one of those horror stories because they're never going to end. I mean, you buy more property, they're just going to increase. But the thing though is that you have so many other units now, right? To equal everything out and keep it a much more stable, consistent, less volatile, investment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's always the concept pitch for the stock market is diversification. And I think this is just a better way to diversify, just like you're saying. So, say it all in one word, just having a diversified tenant portfolio. So that makes a lot of sense. I think that when starting a business, everyone has these limiting beliefs like, oh, I want to start small and I don't want to have like a large company and all this, and maybe they're just not able to even fathom what they're capable of building. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, do you feel like there's is it ever too early to scale, or when do you know when is the next time to scale to the next level from what you've been through?
I think if I was going to do it over again, and how I answer this question would be like kind of find out what your 5 and 10 year goals are. If you're actively, if you're passively, whatever it is, and kind of working backwards and developing that roadmap to get to that 5 and 10 years and beyond. And what are my resources? How much money do I have? My credit, all these other things that are parts of factors, sometimes smaller than others. And what can I bring and how can I get to that goal, right? And then I say, well, how does my business have to run? I want to put down, I think everybody when they're starting, if they're trying to really get time freedom and money freedom, they really need to scale and they really need to document all the processes that they have. And you can document, it doesn't have to be 100%. It's not going to be 100%. I mean, I still tweak stuff in our checklist when stuff comes in. So a property comes in, where it goes, we send it out to one of our underwriters to double check something, and all this kind of the process that we have. You're just going to keep on updating it. Once you find a better one, you go, well, you know what, this is much better. I can have that guy just send it here. I get CC'd on it. That's off the, you know what I mean? You're going to fine tune it as you go. But I think document everything up front. People think, I haven't even gotten a sale yet. Why do I document how I find properties? Well, document it, and then you just keep on editing it. And the other thing too is also keep track of all the mistakes you make. So I have like 2 files I keep for mistakes I've made in business and mistakes I made in real estate. And you can add to it with different stuff that you're doing. And you realize, you know what? I'm never going to buy a property in the C- area again, right? Because I know that's on the list, right? So it's a non-negotiable really that I'm just never going to cater to this, because even if some guy sends me something, goes, oh, it's gentrifying, rents are going up, 10 times a year here and all this type of stuff. I'm just not going to do it because I've had an experience with it. I'm definitely not going to put investors' money in it, right? And you just kind of set that all up. And I think everybody has to do that from the beginning and, find out, and you'll know from the beginning if your business is scalable or not. I think, obviously with real estate, people build them very often. So it's definitely possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I find myself doing something and then I stop and think, well, is this something that my virtual assistant could be doing? And why don't I do it this one time? But instead of just doing it, yeah, it's going to be faster if I just do it myself, but I'm going to start taking screenshots and annotating my images and just say, do this, click this button, do this. And then after that one time of investing in that instruction manual for the VA, it's then going to be automated to an extent.
Yeah.
So they're going to come back and ask questions. But I noticed that you're like also a big proponent of just getting stuff to your VAs as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, especially with anything we're doing, if we're putting up any type of media online or anything like this, social media, anything on our websites, it's all going to be edited by a virtual assistant. I don't have any AV experience that I want, and I don't want to learn it. It's not my highest and greatest use of time, and it's also like small stuff that I would have. And I say, hey, I need this document made, and then set up all the DocuSigns for it and all this stuff. Like, here it is. I send it to them. We're going to be closing on a property here in the next couple of weeks, and all the pictures for everything like that. Hey, here's the pictures. Get them all prepped so we can put them on social. All this type of stuff that you have, you can just take it right off your plate. The greatest thing is when you have something, you send it to them while you're, at 5 o'clock at night. And in the morning when you wake up, it's already done. And you're like, this is the best thing ever, because now I'm hitting the ground running. All these tasks are off. And it's just start with, I think the thing is also just find a virtual assistant that's going to work for you for 2-3 hours a week. And then just add on. And then just tell them it's going to be small. And then what I do is I bonus all my virtual assistants every time we buy a property. So I say, hey, this is the end goal. Instead of doing all raises and all this kind of stuff, say, listen, every time we buy a property, which is what everybody's working on here to buy more property, I'll give you a bonus. And it just motivates everybody to, as the focus goal, right? The end goal is buy more property, and everybody's got their little part to it. And we come together as a team. It works for us. It works for our investors. Everybody's aligned on the same, focused on the same goal.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And do you feel like there's certain VAs like that it doesn't matter where they are in the world, and there's some that have to be like in the United States, like in pretty close time zone? Or is it all just like India or Philippines?
I have virtual assistants everywhere. We have content that's written, and that is done by VAs we have in the U.S. And I have other VAs. I've got VAs in obviously Asia. Everybody's got VAs in Asia, but yeah, Asia is a big one for VAs. I have some European VAs. It just depends on what their specialty is. And if we don't have a business with Harborside, we don't have phones ringing off the hooks or stuff like this. It's really just, we're taking emails that come in, we're putting them through a system, we're setting up calls with them, mainly for myself or one of my partners to get on the phone with them. And when we're doing that, there's not a need for them to be in the same time zone. Now, if we had a business that was required much more time specific answering, right, then you might need one in the US that's closer to your time zone, or South America or something like this. But I think finding them, you're going to find VAs from all over, and you're going to find a lot of expats too. I get contacted a lot for expats doing virtual assistance work as well, which is great. Great writers or expats that write on, possibly they were in real estate before or any type of industry, and they could write for you and stuff like this, and they understand that they can't do it back in the United States what they used to. But
You mean an expat like an American living abroad? Or
yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have it, a lot of people with like travel blogs and all this type of stuff. You might have someone that was I found someone that was used to be a real estate agent, and now they would write articles for real estate. And it's one of my partners actually, and they're using them for their website. But it's a perfect dynamic. This person knows U.S. real estate in the area. They're in both the same area or were, and can write articles for this person. And there's no, you know what I mean? They're on the other side of the world. This person's the United States, leveraging time. And you can find all this stuff on these freelancer websites, and you can also find it with the reviews. And they kind of make it really simple. It's much simpler hiring VAs now than it was even a couple of years ago. It's a much more streamlined process with reviews and the grades that they have for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I personally like to use Upwork for like ongoing work, and then Fiverr for just a one-time deal. Like, just make this picture better. Is that
Yep.
primarily what you use?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Great. Just a few more questions before we go. The other thing I was wondering about was when you're starting out and you're trying to build your power team, how do you get people to take you seriously? And if you have no track record, for example, like talking to brokers and they're worried about, can you close on a deal and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think two things. You can, if with some people that go a lot larger off the bat, which I never did, I probably wouldn't be the best for giving you advice on that, but it would be partnering with someone to help you do that. If you're getting your feet wet and you're starting out, it's going to be a lot easier for a broker to take you seriously. So I was just talking to someone, they said they had an offer in, they don't own any, they do not own any multifamily, and they have an offer pending on a 200 unit one. And you go, okay, why is this broker give him this? And I asked, you're asking, why is the broker giving him this deal? Is it not a great deal? Like, why would it be? Because the guy definitely is going to have a list of people, a buyer's list. Every big broker is going to have a buyer's list that's going to take these off their hands, because we've done it to ourselves before. And they go, this person bought one from before. I'm going to send it here. It's off market, comes to us. We have all the time to underwrite it, take all this time. We don't have to put down any hard money up front. So that's, I think, starting on a smaller level. And you say, listen, it's my first property. You're definitely at that point, you're going to be dealing with a residential broker, right? If it's 1 to 40 units. So at that point, this is what they do all day long, right? Dealing with new homeowners and stuff like this. So it'd be fine. If you're starting and you want to start in commercial real estate, it's going to be, it's a whole different beast, right? How people operate in that realm. And it's just like your income doesn't really matter when you're signing on a commercial loan. It's just like what you've learned from your residential broker doesn't really matter from the commercial broker. Commercial broker, like I said, they're going to have a list of people they're dealing with, and they're going to say, well, how many properties do you own? And then they'll ask you the thing too, which is usually the catch. Can you show proof of funds, right? And no commercial brokers ask a real buyer of commercial real estate if they have proof of funds. That is a single family kind of hip flip house, foreclosed house type mentality, where you're sending in a bank account statement and showing them, hey, I have the money to close and my offer is good. It's just not, just not what I'm writing on the paper. And so I think just like, depending on what type of properties you're starting with, and if you want to go larger up front, have the team with you, align with the team that's going to be able to show you, hey, I have, guy over here, person A here, I have girl C over here, and we have 400 units together. And this person's got a net worth that's over this property here. So we know we're going to get the mortgage, and kind of just spelling out everything with the underwriter and using their terminology. And then also, I think on smaller commercial properties, when I speak to smaller commercial brokers, like the first thing they'll ask, he would hear would be, have you changed, have you edited the taxes, right? You're not just taking what this person's paying. Have you adjusted the taxes for what you're purchasing the property for, or what you're putting the offer in for? And if someone hasn't done that, I mean, right off the bat, that they're a newbie investor kind of a thing. So it's all these commercial brokers, they're filtering you, and they want to make sure that they're not going to give you a deal. They spend all this time getting a $4 million deal from someone, and they told this guy, listen, we've got so many good buyers, all this kind of stuff. Last thing they want is to get into something 45, 60 days and then find out this guy's not closing. He hasn't put up any more hard money. He doesn't have the net worth. His team's not there. They're not giving him a loan. All the things that can happen in this property, right? Or he says he wants to renegotiate, as they say, or retrade for $500,000 less. Like stuff like this that broker's going to be like, have to go back to his buyer, his seller, and tell him that and say, hey, this guy wants to see if you take off 15% off the price because he didn't do his due diligence. I mean, it's completely unprofessional. So they're trying to avoid that, and that's why they're putting you through the filtering. So aligning yourself with bigger people for the properties you want to buy, right? And then also, or maybe start smaller. Maybe buy 1 or 2 small properties, see how they run, see how everything works with them, and then moving into that new next realm.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that also kind of segues into, from your experience, what do you feel like is some of the most common pitfalls or mistakes that real estate investors make when they're getting started, or even after they get started?
I think reserves is a big thing. And a lot of new investors always will, when I speak to them, they're buying a $400,000 property, and the down payment, let's say, is 25%. And they say, well, I have enough money to close. Well, how much do you have? I have 100,000. Well, there's a ton of extra money that's required. I mean, not that there's a lot for closing fees. You have a few percent there, but what are you doing for reserves? What are you doing for your operating capital? How much are what are you putting for this? So they are just thinking that everything's going to run smooth from the beginning. And the other thing too is that you can check bank statements, you can check T12, like last 12 months of a person's financials for the property, right? But it still doesn't show what really is going to happen to the property. We always give it 3-6 months after purchasing multifamily. Obviously, different commercial asset classes will be a little different, but because you know that there's people that just got put into that property that could just fog a mirror, right? They didn't pass any type of underwriting. I have to now set aside money for that to get rid of them. I have to set aside money to renovate that. I have to set aside money to release that. So there's all these types of problems that are going to happen. And I think a more seasoned investor just knows off the bat, hey, we're buying 100 units in this C plus area, right? And we know that we've looked over all the leases of the current tenants, and we know that X amount, right? 10, 15% are not up to the level that we would rent them at. So now we have to set aside money for that. And we have to make sure that we tell our investors, it's going to take us 3 to 6 months to get this on track, right? Not to where it wants to go, but like just on track, right? And kind of work from there. And this is the issue that always happens with mom and pops, where they're just renting on a handshake. They're renting on a one-page lease. And it's just something that you're getting a better deal, but you have to know what goes into it. And I think a lot of new real estate investors just think, hey, it's, I'm going to make 5% on this property or 10% every year, cash on cash. And I'll have money for the roof that needs to be done in 8 years. And that's all I need to worry about.
Yeah, I know that a lot of different syndicators will tell their passive investors that it takes, say, 3 to 6 months at least to stabilize the property. What time frame do you also use that time frame before making distributions?
I would say we'll usually do distributions the first quarter. We're smack in the middle of COVID right now, so when we're talking to investors, we're probably going to tell them it's probably 6 months. We probably won't make payout distributions for 6 more months, and we'll just pay all the back distributions. But we're just going to hold on to that money at this point, and so we know that everything pans out, right? We haven't really been affected too much by COVID. We had less than 2% of our tenants lost their jobs with COVID. So because we buy in very employer diverse areas, and but yeah, it's usually gonna be the first quarter. But they just have to know that we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months in the sense of how many people are going to default, how long it's going to get for people to come out, stuff like this. And you kind of have estimates, but it's really in 6 months, we're going to be on track, right, to where we're going. And then the value add kind of is going to be rolling. And we're going to be over the next 12, 24 months, depending on the size of the property, doing that value add. Now, with everything with value add now has kind of been paused because of everything that's happening with COVID. But we still know that, hey, we're not raising rents for another 6-7 months. We know that we're not going to be doing any upgrades to the interior of the units other than what's required. Is going to be pushed off for another 12 months. But so our business plan now at this point is going to start in 12 months really and go from there. So we used to do 5-year holds. Maybe now we do a 7-year hold on this property, and you let your investors know up front, and then just let them know the first 3-6 months is everybody getting on track. And anybody that's ever owned single family, double, duplex, triple, whatever it is, I mean, you have this problem with any size property. So anybody that's owned that before is going to understand that.
Okay, so anytime you don't make a distribution, it's kind of like paid in kind, it's still accruing, and then you would pay them any additional amounts later?
I don't know how other syndicators do it, but this is just with COVID. I mean, so this is not a normal thing that will be happening hopefully in years to come. But what we're talking about with property that we're closing now, which I can't really talk too much about it for SEC stuff, but we're not doing distributions until January 2021. And we've told our investors that. And at 2021, we'll pay back 2 quarters of distributions. So they'll get a lump sum for 2 months or 2 quarters, right? 6 months, let's say, about approximately where we are in the year. But so they'll get that distribution and it's just accruing, but we're just using that as a capital because we have no idea. I mean, you have no idea what's going to shut down. I mean, you're buying properties in February of 2020. I mean, you had no idea what was going to be happening in March of 2020, April in 2020. You know what I mean? It's just everything completely changed. So we just don't know. So it's a way of being conservative and then just paying out. We'll pay out distributions as we see stuff happening, as we see money coming in, as we get a grasp on the property. I mean, when you start, like I said, you'll figure out, and then once stuff's getting on track and you have consistent income coming in, you have defaults are declining, right? So you've gotten good tenants in there for ones that weren't so great, and you kind of like started that process. That's when the distributions would all be paid out, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that your investors could appreciate that. It seems like a very prudent thing to do, to just wait for things wait for the dust to settle.
Yeah, I'm a passive investor in different ones, and that's how they did it as well with us, different operators. So I'd rather have them hold the money and not call me for a cent. And all I care about is seeing the collections. And really, our collections were very consistent across the board on all the properties we had ownership in. So.
Okay. So before we go, I realized that I forgot to mention it in the intro that you're also the host of the Global Investors podcast. And why don't you talk a little bit more about that and why you decided to focus on kind of catering toward global investors?
Right. So when I was running my payment processing business, I would, you're out to dinner and you're spending time with people that you're working with, and they ask you what you're investing in and what you're doing, and we talk about all different types of businesses. I said, well, real estate, and this is what I'm doing, and it's just not something that's available, right? The commercial real estate opportunities in the United States aren't something. I mean, you've been all over the United States or all over the world as well and lived. I mean, you're aware that it's just not something that's you can duplicate in other parts of the world. So it was something that they were always asking me, how do I get involved? What do I do? And I was like, I have no idea, to be honest. I know what I do, and but so it was something when I was starting the podcast, my first investor was a foreign investor. And what we did was I was like, I have to learn more about it. So the whole process with the Global Investor Podcast, we interview a lot of all US-based real estate people, professionals involved in the industry. A lot of them have had direct experience with foreign investors, and it kind of gives a roadmap for investors from outside the country to how can they start how can they start looking at properties in the United States? How do they have a team? I have some people that contact me that want to go 100% passive, some people that want to go 100% active, some people that want to partner with us. So it's just a very interesting thing that everybody has their different target, and I kind of what their goals are, right? And I think with the Global Investor Podcast, we're able to speak to these professionals, provide insight to potential investors that are foreign, that have no idea. It would be like us going to a foreign country that we've never been to and trying to invest, right?
Yeah, especially for certain things like saffron is something that I forget which country that is, Iran or Iraq, in the Middle East somewhere, or maybe it's not available, and also Spain, I think. So it's interesting to think from that perspective as well. They just don't have easy access to that asset class. So
right. Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you if they want to connect more?
Yeah, Mason. So if people want to reach out, you can reach me personally. It's charlescarillo.com or globalinvestorspodcast.com. It's all on the same website. And then for my real estate investment company, it's harborsidepartners.com. And, come onto my website. If you're interested in learning how to invest in real estate anyway, passively, actively, I do a 30-minute call with anybody that's interested. And possibly we can work together in the future.
All right. Well, Charles, thanks again for coming on, and really enjoyed it. Hope to do it again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Sure.